Thanks very much. Thanks.
Welcome, everyone. I want to thank BAFTA for having us here tonight to chat about all things Tennant.
Yes, how embarrassing.
Including David Tennant. Now, David, I think you're in Richard II right now
Yes.
at BAM,
Yes.
performing Shakespeare. And I think it probably is the hottest ticket in town right now that doesn't have Hamilton printed on it. And I know this because I've tried
I
to
can
buy
write
tickets.
Hamilton on your ticket if that helps.
That I can frame it.
Yeah.
I've tried to buy tickets, and it's impossible. You have to. It's $500 and more in some cases.
That's
and stuff,
ridiculous.
If you're lucky.
Quite
or
right, too.
Shakespeare. How dare they? Not even any rap battles in this. I think
know.
they need to add that.
I'm delighted.
I guess the first question, though, is this King George's ultimate revenge, though, that you're coming over here and matching Hamilton on sales?
Well, yes, maybe. I don't know. It's no, it's lovely that it's 400 years after Shakespeare died that we can create a bit of a fuss, a bit of a hubbub. Mm-hmm. I'm quite pleased.
Yeah, I mean, what's been the most gratifying part of the response you've heard from people coming to see the show? I mean, do you get a chance to talk with them after? What has moved them?
It's just been lovely. The audiences here are so warm and so sort of connected to it. Because you don't know, you don't know how America will respond, do you? But I think they probably respond more warmly than the UK do, to be honest. No, we've had an incredibly warm reception and an enthusiastic one, and a sense that people are sort of hungry for the RSC to come here and to bring these plays, and I'm just very thrilled to be part of it, really.
To sort of start with Shakespeare, I think, in terms of your career, because I mean it's the cornerstone of modern drama as well, so we should start maybe with Shakespeare.
Sure.
I always like to think about what the first Shakespeare performance was for you that connected. For me, I know the first time I saw Midsummer Night's Dream, I was about 8 years old at a production in Stratford,
Right.
the Stratford Shakespeare Festival, and that was the one where it really connected with me.
Right.
Do you have a seminal performance like that for you?
For me, it was a theatre company called Theatre About Glasgow, or TAG, as they were known in Scotland, and they came round our school. I don't know what age I would have been. I was secondary school or high school, and so I must have been 13, maybe 14, something like that. And they came and they set up in our gym hall, and they did a production of As You Like It. And I remember being entranced by it, and being particularly entranced by the guy that played Touchstone, who just seemed really cool. And by complete and utter coincidence, that became the first professional Shakespeare role that I played at the RSC some 20 years ago. I'm impossibly young. There's clearly been some mistake in the dating issue.
How that happened. I think the thing that for me connected when I saw that particular performance was the physicality. Because obviously not all the language registered with me always, but I could get what was being said because of how they were moving and the physical nature of the performances.
Sure, but there's something. I think there's also something about that language that connects with you on a slightly fundamental level. You don't necessarily understand what it means, but that's why I would always say it's best if your first experience of Shakespeare is seeing it in performance, because that's what it's meant to be. You know, he didn't write them down to be studied dryly in a classroom. He wrote them down to be performed, and there's something about the way he puts words together that you receive them on many different levels. You receive them sort of poetically, you receive them intellectually, and you just kind of receive them in your gut somehow when it's good. Obviously, when it's bad, it's a long, tedious night in the theatre. But when it works, I think it does. I think it connects. I think it sort of fires something in you.
Right. Is that something when you first started studying acting, when you moved from just being a fan to being an actor, was physicality one of the first things, the lessons that you had to sort of master to begin with?
Oh, God, you're getting dangerously close to asking me about process, which is a terrifying thing. Because then, of course, acting is such a difficult thing to talk about, to unpick. Mm-hmm. Immediately you sound like some self-indulgent wanker. I mean, so quickly. It's so hard because it is a slightly nebulous thing. And you sort of, even when you think you've got it right, you sometimes watch something back and go, "What were you thinking?" it's all kind of, it's tissue thin, really, isn't it? Getting the moments right. It's so difficult to grab. Which is my long way around of saying I don't really know. I suppose, yes, at drama school we certainly did movement classes. We we did the things that drama students do. We went to zoos and watched animals, and we tried to become the essence of aluminium or whatever it was we were doing that day. Which I say quite flippantly, and a lot of it is terrible nonsense, but it's all about sort of freeing you up. It's about allowing you to make those kind of connections that don't necessarily make intellectual sense, so that you just allow yourself to kind of your brain to fire in a perhaps a non-linear way, because I think that's where the real sort of I think there's a place for studying text and for understanding things, and that's very much part of what you need to do, or what I need to do. But then there's another bit that's quite hard to kind of define, and sometimes something physical can unlock that, or sometimes it can just be a sort of weird association in your head. It can be a color, it can be a song. It's just a bit hard to unpick, I find. Right. Very hard to talk about. There's events like this make
and yet you just have.
Well, events like this make me rather nervous, because by definition you're supposed to come up with some sort of insight as to what the process of acting is, or how you do it, and I have no idea, or certainly no idea how to communicate that to anybody else without sounding like a total wanker.
I like
use that phrase in America? No, but you know what I mean, right?
I think it comes across.
Yeah, I don't need to spell it out.
I like what you said about Shakespeare having to be the first time is to really experience it performed. Is there a difference, though? I mean, for example, performing it live versus performing on camera. As you've had one performance tape for film with Hamlet.
Indeed.
Richard hasn't yet. But for people who aren't lucky enough to see it at BAM, for example, if they were to somehow watch a tape performance later, will they still get the same experience from it? How is it different on camera?
Well, a live experience is always going to be different to an experience on screen, but different doesn't mean better necessarily. They're just different ways of experiencing those stories, and there are some great examples of Shakespeare on screen, which I think absolutely bring those plays to life. The Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet is a perfect thing to show to kids in class. Show them that before you start, going through it line by line. And it's I think you were probably referring to Hamlet, which we did on stage, and then we filmed for the BBC. That was a slightly bit of a hybrid, I suppose, because the production had been envisaged for stage, and then we kind of stripped it back, and we absolutely did play it for the camera, and that was interesting, having done something for 100 performances or whatever, and then trying to rediscover it for a lens that's there rather than an audience that's out there. But with the benefit of sort of knowing it inside out by then, that was a rare treat, actually, because usually when you're filming something, it's quite on the hoof. You're rehearsing, you're recording, you're doing it as you go. So it was lovely to have those words kind of in your bones, and then to try and sell it for a camera. It was a real luxury.
Right. Does the RC now, with training, do they think about camera training for Shakespeare? Because there's so many different ways to see it now.
The RSC doesn't. I mean, drama schools do, okay. But the RSC, it's about performance on stage. Although they now do this thing called Live from Stratford, which is one of those link ups where you can go to your local cinema all over the world and see either live or as live. And we did that. Richard II was the first production that did that, but they now do that with all the main stage Shakespeare productions, and that's another way of experiencing it. I was a bit dubious about those events. The National Theatre started doing them quite a few years ago now, and I never thought it would really work until I went to see one. I saw Coriolanus, the Tom Hiddleston Coriolanus, which was from the Donmar Theatre in London. I saw it on Vancouver Island, very far away. And I thought, and I had some friends in it, so I thought, well, I can't get to see them. I'll go along. And I thought it was a bit of a duty call, but there's something electric about it, because even if it's not quite live because you're in a different time zone, it still feels absolutely like it's happening in front of you, and it could be quite a weird hybrid of the sort of the live event and the cinema event, but actually the two sort of combine and create something rather extraordinary with added close-ups. It's great. So if you've never been to one of those, I recommend it. Look at your sort of local art house cinema is probably showing these RSC productions or National Theatre productions, and it's an exciting event to be part of. Horrible to be a performer, terrifying, because it's terrifying enough every night on stage. But to think that this is being beamed around the world, and that any fluff you make, any blob of spittle that sticks on your chin, is going to be witnessed on Vancouver Island. It's all a little bit. Yeah.
In terms of the difference, how early did you learn the difference between acting for stage and acting for screen? What was the sort of process of? Do you think of them as different mediums, and do you calculate performances?
Yeah, they're different. They require very different things. You know, they require different types of energy. Obviously, if you're in the theatre, it's about a very concentrated burst of energy for sort of 3 hours from 7:30, whereas filming something is about choosing those moments within a day which can be very stop-start, and which has a lot of waiting around, and it's about finding your kind of groove, and it's also about filming something is about getting that moment once truthfully, vividly, at the moment when the lighting works and everyone remembers their lines, and just that one take. That's all you need. You just need the one killer take. Right. Whereas in the theatre, it's about recreating a sort of emotional journey every night. So they're very different. Also, one's about sort of you have to talk loudly, and one you don't. There's a lot of there's practical considerations as well. So yeah, they're different. Although they're still, you know, one informs the other as well. I love that I've been very fortunate to have the variety of being able to do a bit of both. And there's I'm sure that influences the type of actor you are and the type of choices you make. You know, you're always learning, I suppose. So working in all those different types of storytelling form is very informative, I think.
Are there plans to do similar with Hamlet, something with Richard II, where you tape it and
well, we did the live link up is now on DVD, so that gets made available. Okay. So it's not quite the same as Hamlet, which was very much done for camera. It's a record of what happened in that theatre that night. Right. But done, you know, with a proper camera rig and angles and close-ups and all that sort of stuff. Right. So yes, I suppose that exists as a one of the heartbreaking things about theatre is often that it exists in that moment and then it's gone forever. Right. Yeah. That's wonderful if you're in the audience that night. But and it's not the same to watch it on a DVD afterwards. But at least there's a sense of what that production was and a record of it. And I imagine that may be of passing interest to future Richard II's.
Now you've done Richard II here. You had Hamlet. Are we going to see you in a comedy on these shores anytime soon as well as Shakespeare?
I don't know. This is the first time I've done a play on American soil, and I'm rather encouraged by the audiences. So I'd be very happy to come back. Certainly.
Right. Well, I think if you and Catherine Tate did Taming of the Shrew, you would sell out not only BAM but possibly every single theater in Broadway. So I'm asking for the royalties now, but
sure. Okay. We'll
when you pitch that idea to her.
Yeah, we'll negotiate after we.
Okay, perfect, great. In addition to theater, I mean, you came of age at a really interesting time for British television as well. What sort of things did you grow up watching? We know Doctor Who, and we'll get to that. But yes. what sort of things informed your young viewing habits?
I loved Doctor Who. I loved that sort of fantasy world. I loved the Incredible Hulk, which was an American show. I loved that. Blake 7 was a big one for me as a kid. I don't know how much that's travelled over the USA, but that was a sort of The Magnificent Seven in space done on a BBC budget.
Sounds amazing.
It was.
Yes,
was
I
amazing.
Imagine.
Yes, I suppose as a kid, particularly things like that. Right. I also watched a lot of comedies. I loved a sitcom. Even sitcoms that I didn't particularly find funny. I sort of loved the form of it. I loved I suppose the kind of half-hour format, the kind of the broad characters maybe. Yes, I would watch any sitcom that came on, and still love that form and Yeah, I loved funny. I loved people that made me laugh. I still marvel. I still think they're that's a real gift. People who can really make you laugh. People who can really sort of access that sort of someone like Catherine Tate. It's an amazing gift.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you were fortunate too to be, and it's in American TV now too, that television isn't necessarily a place where you go when you can't find anything else to do. It seems like at that time they were doing such great creative things on TV that you were able to see, and so when you started acting, you realized that was a forum that you could find really interesting work to do. It wasn't just a...
Oh, yeah, I mean, TV's where the good stuff is these days, really. Mm-hmm. There's almost too much of it. There's too much good stuff. We're all aware of debates you have with your friends. You're going, but there's 5 seasons of that, and you've really got to start from the first one. And you kind of have to make these calculations in your head. You think, I don't know if I don't have enough hours in my life to do 5 seasons. I might just go with that new one that started, because I can be in from the start on that. I'm not very good at picking things up. I'm a bit anal about it. I need to see things from the beginning. And I need to, and so yes, you get very passionate about those shows that you invest that time in, and that reward you with those that sort of that long journey you go on with the character. I love it. I mean, I love it as a consumer, and I love being part of those shows. Definitely. Yeah.
What were some of the things you learned in your first TV roles that you didn't maybe learn when you were studying theater?
I learned how it works. At my drama school, we didn't really do any. Mm-hmm. There was no TV training at all, or there was sort of some, but it was very old-fashioned, multi-camera kind of. It doesn't really happen anymore. Right. So, no, I remember sort of learning on the hoof. I remember bluffing a lot the first, and I only did like tiny little bits of TV at first. A couple of days here and a couple of days there, and I remember sort of looking around and thinking, okay, I'll just try and figure out how this works. I didn't understand that you shot a scene in different ways. Nobody explained that to me. So there would be a wide shot and then a close up, and then they'd reverse over your shoulder and do a close up of someone else, and nobody explains it. So you just kind of, as it's going on, you just sort of think, oh, I see. Oh, and then so then they cut that together, and then they cut from there to, oh, I see. I sort of put it together in my head. Because I did my first bit of TV even before I went to drama school. I did something when I was 16. And I really didn't know what I was doing. But didn't ask. Just sort of pretended I knew. I mean, ludicrous. They must have all known that I was terribly green. But yes, I sort of learned it on the hoof, really. Still am. Still with things about lenses and stuff. I'm still going, it's a 15. Okay, yeah. yeah. So I'll alter my performance accordingly. Yeah. So that's still an ongoing education.
So now for Who, obviously you grew up watching it. When you first got the call that it was going to happen, what do you remember your reaction when you found out?
It wasn't a call. I was in Russell T Davies's front room, who was the showrunner, and he'd just completed season 1, and he was showing me bits of it, and I thought he was just showing me because I was interested, and because we'd been working together on another show on a show called Casanova, which he'd also written, and he said, "Oh, come round, I'll show you some sort of early rough cuts." And I went, "Oh, brilliant, great, this will be fun," because this was the return of Doctor Who, the show that I'd grown up with, as indeed had Russell, and so he showed me a few bits, and then he sort of dropped the bombshell that they were looking for someone to take over. So it sort of knocked the wind out of me, really. Very odd when you've grown up with something, you've been a real proper fan of something with posters on your wall, and my granny knitted me a long scarf and a cricket jumper, and and I careened around my back garden pretending to be all sorts of different characters. Extraordinary that all these years later that should sort of come full circle, and that somebody and that somebody should be asking me to be part of this show that hadn't even been on TV for however many years. It all seemed very unlikely. It is pretty unlikely, really. So it was quite surreal out of body experience, and it was very exciting. And then it was a bit scary. And I took a sort of week or so to really think it through on Russell's instruction, because of course he'd in many ways had the same experience. The show he'd grown up with that had inspired him to become a writer, and he knew that you were going to have a myriad responses to this. It's exciting, and then of course there's a reality check that you go through. You go, I have to actually turn up and do this and not break it, and not sort of disappoint my 8-year-old self. That's the hardest thing. And even though Doctor Who had been off TV for a while, the amount of attention and scrutiny it was getting, even before that first season had aired, you were aware that you were coming into something that if it didn't work, you would have a very public failure, and that would be quite difficult to. And you didn't even know how the first season was going to be received at that stage, so you thought I might be coming into something that doesn't carry on. You know, I might film this tiny scene to introduce myself at the end of season 1, only to find that's it. You know, the shortest serving actor in the role. So there were a lot of things to think through, and also I was aware that I would be surrendering a certain amount of anonymity. You know, I'd enjoyed being a jobbing actor. I'd enjoyed having certain people would recognise you occasionally, but it wasn't something that impacted on my life particularly. And you know, I was aware enough to know that there would be my everyday existence would be altered by taking on a part like this. Right. You know, even if it didn't work, they're just, you know, your face would be splashed around enough. Right. So there were all sorts of things to process. And then I did one day just wake up and think, what's the debate? No, but sort of really, because you kind of go around the houses thinking all the reasons why you shouldn't do it, why it might be a good thing. And then I just thought, come on, this is an extraordinary opportunity to work with an extraordinary writer on a show that you love. What's the debate? So when I had that sort of moment of enlightenment, there was no turning back.
Your 8-year-old won out in the end.
He was always going to win out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But you sort of, you know, you don't want to give him that easy victory.
In terms of the character of the 10th Doctor, and I have no hard evidence for this, and I'm going to get geeky now, so I apologize to everyone. I like to sort of think in terms of how his personality came about. There's an episode towards the end of Eccleston's season where the Doctor dances, where we see suddenly after all this tragedy, he's been through the war and the Time War, and he's been grim for so long, and then he has this moment at the end where he smiles and he breaks into this joyous grin. And I feel like that is almost the root of the 10th Doctor in that moment, because so much of what you see later, you have this element of joy that the 9th Doctor doesn't, and there's still tragedy in your character as well, but it feels like that almost is, if we're going to see the birthplace of the 10th Doctor, that's almost, to me anyway, seems like a starting point for
obviously I take my cue from the script and from what Russell wrote, and I guess looking back on it, Casanova was my audition for that part, although I didn't realise at the time. And Russell writes the two characters quite similarly. There's less shagging in Doctor Who, but there's still but they both have a sort of big-heartedness, and I kind of they're both sort of like puppies on springs. They have a Tigger-like quality to them, and there's I think Russell, that was a conscious decision from him, and that was something that I definitely responded to in the way that he wrote it, and I was very happy to enjoy that within the character. Yeah.
Did you have, I mean, because you had been a fan for so long, had you been thinking about what your Doctor would be like since you were 8? I mean, if you, in your wildest dreams, if I could make a Doctor, this is who he'd be.
Well, that's the thing, not really. No, I mean, because it's all sort of, it's such an absurd sort of, because the show had ceased to exist, it wasn't something I spent a lot of time thinking through, because it never was, and then it came back, and the part went to Christopher Eccleston, so you're not sort of sitting there thinking, oh, what would I do with this part when it comes my way? Because of course it's never going to come your way. And that's part of that sort of reality check, when suddenly you've got to come up with a take on this, a version of this that works for you, that you can access every day. You know, it's quite hard work doing a show like that. So you've got to know you can be on it, and that you've got that there can be enough of you in it that you can sort of, you can dive into it, and you can fulfill it over many years. You know, you've got to, it's got to be something that you can sort of reach for, and that makes sense through the kind of prism of who you are, I suppose. So that it all has to happen a bit more. I was aware that there was a sort of a pressure to kind of come up with a thing, and actually, I remember very actively resisting that, because I thought that'll just become self-conscious then, and it's got to be a bit more. Here comes wanky actor word. It's got to be a bit more organic. Otherwise, it'll just be a bit. It just won't work. It'll look artificial, and it won't sort of be connected to anything. So no, I just tried to respond to the script and sort of throw energy at it and see what stuck.
You mentioned joining something larger than yourself when you signed on to Who. I mean, certainly we just saw this past weekend at a convention, comic convention here in New York, with someone proposing in front of you and Matt Smith.
Yeah,
you sort of
yeah.
have joined this huge, larger community.
True.
I mean, has that been? How has that been for you? Sort of realizing that you are part of something larger.
It's lovely. I mean, it's lovely to be so associated with something that means so much to people. It was churlish not to be very kind of humbled by that, actually. And I understand it, because as a kid it meant that to me. It was something that I got so much joy out of, and that really sort of transported me and opened up my imagination. I get it, and I get why it means so much to people. And this is the way that Harry Potter means so much to some people. There's something about that type of genre that sort of transports you in a way that's got a real joy to it. There's got an uncynical nature to it, which is it's lovely to be associated with that. Yeah,
I think you've also, from joining part of that larger fandom to creating, I think, your own fandom with Broadchurch, which has sort of attracted a really positive, strong fan base for a show that's very dark and cynical, the opposite of what you've been doing. Yeah. Has that been gratifying to sort of watch that build a show like that from the ground up and being part of that instead of joining something?
It's lovely that it connected in the way that it did. I mean, when we were making it, we were all we got sort of each script as we went, so we didn't know where it was going. And as each script arrived, and as we moved through shooting of the season, people got more and more excited to know what would come next. So we were having the experience that you then hope the nation and the world is going to follow with, but you never know. So yeah, very, very gratifying that people had the same experience that we did, and it's just it's a great bit of writing, and then what he did with the second season was so clever and so unexpected and equally kind of edge of your seat kind of thrilling. So I hope he manages it with season 3. I don't know.
Hopefully he's giving you something to know what to expect. Have you gotten any?
Not a clue.
Nothing.
Not a clue.
Wow. All right. Okay.
No, there was a press release the other day. I learned all sorts. I learned who's in it with me. I learned that what the story's about. So no, I know as much as everyone in this room, possibly less.
Oh, there you go. You did have the experience of bringing it over here and doing a version of it here on Gracepoint.
Yeah.
What did you learn about the difference between American and British television for that experience? What was that?
I think if I learned anything about that, it's that there's not enough of a difference anymore. And I think that's ultimately a positive thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's what did for Gracepoint, though, is that we were in a world where Broadchurch had already been a sort of international thing. Right. And with Gracepoint, we set out very consciously to tell the same story, because someone did the math, and said, well, there's an enormous nation here, 0.2% of whom have seen this British show. Let's tell them that story. But actually, it had sort of gone wider than that, and probably because Gracepoint was really well made with some fantastic actors. I was really proud of it, but it just didn't get the kind of traction, I think, because Broadchurch already filled that space, probably. Because actually, the process of making it's the same. It's the same sort of people in the same sort of departments around the world, and everyone's trying. Everyone loves their job and is trying really hard and to do the best they can. So, and I don't think it was a reflection on the show that Gracepoint wasn't perceived as the success that Broadchurch was, because it was really well made. It was just that I think dramas now go out internationally, even if they don't officially. They do go out internationally. Right. And it's something I think the broadcasters are running to catch up with. If something premieres in one country, get it on in the other country straight away.
Right.
Because that's that's how we all expect to receive things now. Mm-hmm. It's why Netflix has got it so they've just hit a moment and they've got it so right, and so we all watch House of Cards around the world together. And it's just part of the evolving nature of our industry, I guess.
Right. Although even in House of Cards' case, that's a remake of a British show. They just waited long enough.
It's a completely different show. Right, it's a show that has its own identity. It's like what The Office did. The first episode is recognisably the same as the British show, and then it's a whole other show, equally glorious,
right?
But very different show. And I think that's, I think that's probably how we need to reuse those formats now, if indeed that's what we do.
Right. Now, I know you're not just saying nice things about Netflix because you work for them on Jessica Jones, but well, let's keep saying nice things about them because we want them to bring you back somehow.
Yes. Because my because my year's free subscription runs out about now. So if they want to send me another one of those lovely cards they gave us on day one of Jessica Jones, I'd be very grateful.
But if joining the world of one fandom was enough with Doctor Who, suddenly you're in the Marvel fandom, and that's a whole other kettle of fish and super powerful fish. But when you signed on for it, was part of the attraction the idea of doing a villain after doing the Heroes for Song?
I guess so. I mean, I did what they asked me to do. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like they said, "Who do you want to play?"
Do you want to be Jessica? Here you go.
Yeah. No, they came to me with a project and with a part, and it seemed like a really good idea, and it was Marvel Comics, who I love, I always have done. So it was very exciting to be part of, and also hard not to be aware that they were the sort of biggest entertainment franchise in the world. And Marvel and Netflix together were clearly the coming trend. So there was lots of things in its favour. But ultimately, you just go, this is an amazing character with an extraordinary set of given circumstances, and the scripts are really well written. Of course, I'm going to want to do that. Yeah.
Right. Were you upset? I mean, you had something of a costume with the purple suit. Do you wish you'd had a supervillain costume in that?
Well, I did about hearing about the role and then finally catching up with the showrunner and the exec to sort of talk it through. I did have a couple of days of thinking, am I going to be painted purple every day? Is that going to get really boring by week 3? Am I going to destroy pillowcase after pillowcase? It was very quickly put out of my mind that was going to... It wouldn't really fit the world of Jessica Jones. It's a very sort of real-world superhero show. It's very gritty. It's very adult. It's very adult. Don't let your kids watch it. I suppose that was never going to really be the way that they would portray that character. But there's lots of nods to it, as you say. Yes, I think we got through every purple suit on sale in Manhattan. It was decided I would never wear the same suit twice, so that set the costume department quite a task. I suppose that became something of a costume. But yes, I think probably being spared the purple makeup every day was ultimately a blessing, I think.
Not to get back to the dreaded process part. I know how much you hate talking about that, but through all the different roles you've played, I mean, is there one sort of foundational piece of advice you received at the very beginning of your career that sort of just stuck with you and has helped inform the different roles you've done?
Not really, because every job has a different set of challenges. There are more sort of, there are. If I've been given good advice, it's more practical. It's about, there are too many of us. You're not as special as you'd like to think you are. So be on time, turn up, learn your lines, be nice, don't make a fuss, get on with it. Which I think may be simplistic, but is advice that many actors should take. Just because, to be honest, most actors do. And there's a sort of myth that actors are sort of rather precious and rather difficult, and occasionally that's true. Mostly it's not, because mostly actors have come up through the ranks and realised that it's tough and that there aren't enough jobs and that there are too many of us, and that we're very, very lucky to be getting paid to do something that we would probably do for free. Mm-hmm. Don't tell the union. Most people recognise that and are just, and everyone, and people work hard because they want to, because we enjoy what we do and we want to do it as well as we can, the other stuff is just sort of gets in the way.
One of my favorite roles that you've done isn't even on camera. It's the narrator on 2012 and W1A, which are the commentaries there. So, what's the secret to being a good narrator?
Well, on that particular show, which is brilliantly written by John Morton, and everything's written by John Morton. It looks improvised, that show. It's not. It's every moment is scripted. Every and air is scripted, and every non sequitur in the narration is brilliantly crafted by John. So the only note he gives me is do less. It's just to be as flat as possible, to be as because as soon as you start selling the jokes, it falls apart. It's so beautifully tonally crafted, that show. So yes, I just I've done it I've done the narration from New York. I've done it from Vancouver Island. I've done it from... So usually I've got John in my ear, and he's quite deadpan himself. And I'll sort of do a line and go, "You're trying to be funny. Stop being funny. Little bit of a joke there." So I make him sound very strict. He's not at all. But yes, if there's a secret to that, it's do less. Always do less. Because that's what makes it funny. The fact that nobody in that show is aware they're being funny, including the narrator.
If you could narrate what's going on right now, what do you think?
I'd hate to think what was being said about me. Tennant is talking like a wanker. All his efforts not to be self-indulgent have failed. Yeah, I don't think it's probably as well that we're not.
We're not going there.
Yeah.
I want to do a quick deathmatch game for you
does
from
that
some of your
mean?
characters. I'm going to pit some of your characters against other characters who are in the same profession. I want to tell you to tell me who
Is
would
this like
win.
epic rap battles?
Almost, but you tell me who you think would triumph in these matchups. Okay.
Have you seen epic rap battles?
I have not. I feel bad.
Have you
about
seen
this
epic
now.
rap battles?
The crowd probably has. Yes.
They are some clever guys that make those things.
I will go home and Google
I'm
it
in
now.
one.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
so see now I have.
I mean, I'm not in one, but a character I played is in one, and I'm very proud.
Excellent. All right. Well, hopefully this will be as fun, but maybe not. If not, I'll Google and learn for next time.
Okay.
All right. First one in the doctor versus doctor category.
Right.
Let's pit the.
This is going to be dangerous.
Let's pit the 10th Doctor against Dr. Doug Ross from ER, the Clooney character.
What's the criteria, though? Is it who's better with the ladies? Who's better at changing a kidney? Who's better
You
at
get the
fundraising
rules.
for the Democratic Party? I don't know. He's better at all those things, and I defer to him and thank him for it. It's Clooney. It's got to be Clooney.
Even without the TARDIS.
Well, I don't know what. I don't know what the criteria are.
That's true.
If it's like saving the universe in some kind of, for some kind of, I don't know, invasion of Daleks, then yeah. then he's just a guy who's an actor and the Doctor isn't. But if it's for smouldering, he wins.
Okay, there we go. All right, Grizzled Cop versus Grizzled Cop. Alec Hardy from Broadchurch versus Jane Tennyson from Prime Suspect.
I wouldn't dare to go up against Jane Tennyson. Any kind of battle Alex Hart would give out. He's not very, he's a fragile soul. So, whereas I think Jane Tennyson's pretty tenacious, so she'd probably win that one too.
All right, narrator versus narrator, as we were just talking about. Either as you as your character versus Morgan Freeman.
Oh, come on. Give me one I can win. Give me a chance.
I would give you the edge, so that's why I'm giving you the chance here.
You're being very kind, Ethan, but I think we all know who the winner of that one is.
All right, well, this one, I think. Supervillain versus supervillain. Kilgrave versus Donald Trump.
Well, the thing is, what was extraordinary about Kilgrave was he had the most extraordinary superpower and just used it for selfish means. He wasn't really... Now, you could argue the same about Donald Trump. No, but he just, he wasn't interested in taking over the world. So you could say that Donald's ambition rather trumps Kilgrave's. Trump trumps. I don't think he has mind control. Although he's clearly doing something.
Yeah,
I'm going to give Kilgrave that one.
All right,
just
good.
for the future of democracy.
All right, let's turn to the audience for some questions. Does anyone have any? Raise your hands. Oh, right there.
I wrote a personal essay one time inspired by the story that I heard about the skull that you
Oh, right, yeah.
that you held in the RSC Hamlet.
Yeah.
So it was actually somebody that donated.
That's
the
right.
skull. I'm too nervous to pronounce the name, but
Andrei Tchaikovsky.
Andrei Tchaikovsky. Did it freak you out, like knowing, like what was your relationship to like knowing that this human had wanted to be?
Well, just quickly for anyone who doesn't know, on the first day of rehearsals for Hamlet, we did it sort of introducing each other, talking about the play, talking about the history of the play, and then towards the end of the day, Greg Doran, our director, got this box out, And he said, "I'm now going to introduce you to the final cast member." And we were all like, "What's he talking about?" And he opened this box, put on these gloves, and lifted out a human skull, which was the skull of a concert pianist, Andrei Tchaikovsky, whose dying wish was to play Yorick in a production of Hamlet. And he donated his head to the Royal Shakespeare Company. And nobody had touched it. It had been there, I can't remember how many years now. I used to know the facts. It had been there for a number of years. And there'd been several productions of Hamlet, and nobody wanted to go there. And Greg did. And I was thrilled, actually, because thrilled for Andre, who got his dying wish. But also, it makes that scene where Hamlet picks up the skull and looks into the eyes of someone he knew. It makes it all the more poignant when you're thinking, this is actually about mortality. This is not some actor standing here with a plastic prop. This actually connects to another human being who in a way aspired to be here as well. You know, it worked on several levels. There was just a sort of glory that he was on stage at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. But in terms of what it did to that scene, alas poor Yorick, alas poor Andre, this is what we become. This is it. This is what that scene is. It's about the fact that ultimately we are matter, and we can imaginatively fly through the universe, but it comes down to a lump of bone, and that's what's the core of much of Shakespeare's writing, but it's certainly the core of Hamlet. You know, what a piece of work is a man. That's it. So it was very moving, actually, to be able to bring Andre on stage and to be able to look him in the eye every night. It was a wonderful thing, and I'm thrilled we did it.
Anyone else?
I directed at drama school. It was part of my course. Why are you laughing? It might have been brilliant. You didn't see it. I directed at drama school, and I do have. I'd like to try it. Yes, it would have to be the right thing. And I've had a couple of close calls. I suspect it might happen at some point, but it would have to be something that sort of connected with me. I don't think I'm a director who could turn my hand to anything, but certain things that I feel like I get, I'd like to have a go at, but no immediate plans.
Okay, over there in the corner.
Hi. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
Fantastic and much relieve us. But I was wondering, just as an actor, if there are certain playwrights or screenwriters whose words you just love to say.
Oh yeah, that's when it.
Tell us who they were.
Well, Shakespeare clearly. Yeah. When you have to raise your game to match the words, you know you're in something that's juicy. When you're sort of turning up and going, how do I make this sound like a human being? You know, that's not the right way around. So yeah, Shakespeare, wonderful. Clearly, when you can get on top of those words, and they can take a bit of a grapple because they are 400 years old and they don't all immediately make sense. But when you get inside them, it's like jazz. So yeah, Russell T Davies, I would do anything he wrote ever. I've been so lucky. Chris Chibnall, Tony Marchant. Oh my goodness. I've been very lucky actually and then other sort of in terms of dead people. Tennessee Williams, I loved doing his words. Eugene O'Neill, I'd love to do some Arthur Miller. I never have. There's something extraordinary about Tom Stoppard that's sort of almost beyond all our intellectual capabilities. Oh my goodness! I just went to see Kenneth Lonergan's newest play. I did a play of his. He reminded me 14 years ago, which just doesn't work. The math doesn't work. I'm only 26. You know, someone who writes words like that, who you know, where it's just delicious. So many. I mean, I could, yeah. But good writing is what you seek out. It's what makes your job exciting, I think.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have time for tonight. But I feel like we're just warming up, and you're young,
getting going.
as we know. You could go all night after all this, but
Yeah.
no, we have to call it for now. That's what's up next. Yes, but there's one last thing. Yes.
This is very kind. Did someone just nip out to the 7-Eleven and get that? It's very nice.
Should we start saying yes? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear David.
Very much. You can all have a piece.
How do jobs come to you? I have an agent who phones me up and sends scripts through to my door, and then I go into the auditions and chat to people and play scenes and see what happens.
To keep your hand in is important, and I know that's easier said than done. But if you can get together, it sounds sort of ridiculous, but with like-minded mates and stick something on camera, even if no one's going to see it, just keep loving it.